It's important to understand that when using spread betting, it uses leverage. A smaller initial deposit can control a much bigger overall position. So a small sum of money can control a much bigger corresponding position in that particular market. Again, I think the best way of demonstrating this is actually to do the trade, and you'll see how leverage works. If we choose BP for now, so if I bring up the dealing ticket for BP, now if I wanted to buy, for example, 1,000 BP shares using a traditional stockbroker, and they're trading around about £3.85, then I need at least £3.85 times 1,000 in my account to pay for all the shares. Then, of course, there's the cost of commission and stamp duty on top. So I'd need somewhere north of £3,850 in my account to do the trade. But I can do the same thing using spread betting. Now, doing £10 per point on a UK share gives me the same financial exposure, so the same position in BP as if I owned physical 1,000 shares. If I did £1 a point, it's like owning 100 shares. So the trade I'm doing here, £10 a point times 385, is a £3,850 position in BP. But you'll see, looking down here, the deposit required is only £192.44. So this goes really to the heart of how leverage works. A smaller initial deposit, in this example, £192, can control a much bigger overall position. So my £192, if I did this trade, is going to be controlling nearly a £3,850 position in BP. This is the whole idea behind how leverage works. With the example of BP, our initial margin requirement is 5% of the overall position. So that's why we're getting that figure of 192, because it's 5% of the £3,850 position. So what it means is, to me, to do this trade, I need at the very least that in my accounts. Okay, but I need to understand, of course, I've still got my total exposure to BP is still £3,850. So it's important to understand I can lose more than my initial deposit, okay, which again is why it's important to place things like stop losses. If I wanted to place a stop loss, let's say 5 points away in this example, so if I'm buying at 385, my stop is going to go in at 380, then I can take steps to reduce my risk. And because I'm trying to keep my risk to a lower level, the system recognizes that and reduces the deposit accordingly. But you can see the whole idea, hopefully, of how leverage works. A small initial deposit controls a much bigger financial position. On indices, it's slightly different. If you're ever not sure what the leverage is, what the margin requirements are for individual markets, again, it's quite straightforward. If you go to the drop-down list of the market in question, let's go back to BP, and if I go to Get Info, then if I just bring this window over, I can see the deposit factor is 5%, so it shows me what the position is. With things like indices, it's slightly different. If I go to the FTSE, for example, and go to Get Info on the FTSE, you'll see the deposit factor is 200. So what that means is, for every, for example, £2 a point I do, I need a multiple of 200 of that as the deposit for that trade. So for example, if I did £2 a point on the FTSE, then my minimum deposit requirement would be £400. But again, I can reduce that if I want to by placing a stop loss. If I did £2 a point on the FTSE, my minimum requirement there, deposit required £400. But if I put a stop loss 50 points away, the system recognizes this and will adjust the deposit requirement downwards accordingly to reflect the fact that I'm looking to try and control my risk. So with this, it's very important to understand that even though you're tying up a small sum of money, that's not necessarily all you could lose on the position. Of course, you can control that using stop losses and guaranteed stop losses. More of that later. So with margin, you have effectively more bang for your buck when it comes to trading, so you have the potential for bigger rewards on the capital tied up, but of course hand in hand with bigger rewards in financial markets goes the risk of bigger losses, which is why it's very important to think about controlling that risk using stop losses.